Okay, everybody. So we are wrapping things up this week. We've got your final project photos. So let's get right into that and talk about these. So first up, we've got Bonnie's images, and I'm just going to put up her artist statement first so you guys can just take a look at that and put it on pause if you want to go in and read through the whole thing. But I think what I really love about this, Bonnie, is you give us a historical background about why this project is important to you. You tell us a little bit about this place that we wouldn't have known simply by looking at the images themselves. And then you kind of invite us into the project and perhaps ask us a question to consider while we're looking at these images, which essentially is, is this development good or is it bad? And I think those are all really wonderful things that you're doing in your artist statement. And these are the things that I think really good artist statements include. You're not describing the project or the pictures for us. You're sort of supplementing it and adding information for our consideration to kind of append or understand the photos in a deeper way beyond just what we see from them visually. So great job with that. And then getting into your images. So you start your project out with this image. Obviously, you've got construction vehicles, and it's interesting to me. Almost there's a question here in this image. Are they building something or are they tearing something down? It's kind of a little vague in here, and especially, because it's dark, it's overcast, you've chosen an exposure that's a little bit on the darker side. I think that certainly adds to the feeling that we're not super happy about whatever's going on here. That at least from your perspective, the construction or deconstruction, I guess, is not necessarily a good thing. And this is great because we also talk about how perceptual and aesthetic skills can really add to your photo set here. What I would say is the exposure here is not correct in terms of, okay, the camera tells us what the correct exposure is here. This exposure is definitely dark, but I think that the darkness actually adds to our aesthetic appreciation of this because it says something about this place and this situation in this landscape. So really love that a lot. Great way to start your project and great use of aesthetic and perceptual skills here. And then again, a similar type of shot, but we've got the fence there. So again, having a fence there puts a barrier between the viewer and the construction stuff. And I think what that also does is imply that the viewer doesn't necessarily have any input as to what's being done here. So you're kind of just on the outside as a bystander. Perhaps in your case, just watching your town be commercialized or be built up with all these malls without having much say into it. So I think that's really great there. And then this image, we've got a really nice perceptual line. Our eye is starting down here and going in through the image all the way to almost the end, and then it kind of takes this nice right turn. But the thing that I love about it is you've got this one cement block that's kind of out of position there. So our eye kind of really lands and stops on that and really begins to consider, again, the emptiness of what's going on here. Is this, an abandoned parking lot for, a mall or something like that? So having that pattern and then breaking it up really, again, causes us to stop for a second, pause, and think about it. So again, another really wonderful image. And then you put that image in a little bit more context with sort of the emptiness of the buildings, the leasing sign, and just sort of the one sign of life there is just the Mighty Taco, which I like the fact that it's a drive through, so it's like kind of you're just coming through and passing through. You're not really stopping or really interacting or engaging with anything there. And then some detail shots. I like where you're using the shallow depth of field. Again, saying something about the emptiness of this area. This image, again, I really love how you're using the idea of patterns. In this case, the pattern of the fence going on here, and then the patterns being broken up by the shopping cart that is clearly part of the abandonment that's taking place in this area. So when we've got patterns like this and we can interrupt the patterns with stuff like this, I just think it's really great, and it really holds our eye into the frame a little bit longer than it normally would. So that's great. Again, more empty parking lots. And the thing that I like what you're doing with the parking lots here is it's not all the same. This is very, very different than this shot here, but in many ways, it's similar. So, the emptiness, the negative space, and even the repeating patterns of these circular, whether they're the sewage drainage areas or whatever the case is, all of those things are really visually and aesthetically pleasing because our eye likes shapes and forms and patterns and stuff like that. And even what I love, we see the circles here, and they're repeated by the circle in the sign up there. So I really love that, and I even love how you've got the cars blurring in the background too, as if sort of like everything is just temporal. Everything is passing through. There's nothing that's really being built for the long term or for the sustainability of the people that live there. So I think that's really great. Again, more parking lots, but again, the fact that you're doing a different kind of photo, you're not repeating the same photograph, I think works really well. And then some nice detail shots that are kind of well seen. And then this is interesting. I think, you make this connection between the past and the present here, and this cemetery, and kind of, almost feels like a strange out of place area, but certainly it says something about the past and the present and connecting the two, which again I like a lot because it very much echoes what is stated in your artist statement. And then the last shot, which I think again is really great here, that you've included yourself in the images, and again that personal connection to the work I think comes through in this final shot here. So very well done. Really like your portfolio. I think you've taken all the skills that we've talked about this semester and applied them in different ways in different photographs. And from your artist statement to the ending of your thing, I think everything there matters. Everything adds to the meaning of the project, and it's just the right amount of images. I think that 12 is perfect for this. You're not repeating anything, and you really are telling a story in a way that is very aesthetically pleasing and very, very conceptually rooted. So great job on this, and thank you for all your hard work this semester. So next up we have Alvin's images, and you see Alvin's artist statement here. A couple things about your artist statement, Alvin. Really like sort of how you take us through your psychological approach to this. In other words, how you think about the images and why you created them. I think all of that is really great. Maybe you focus a little bit too much on describing the photographs for us. For example, you talk about the image four, and the desire to capture his emotions and demeanor. I'm not necessarily certain that you need to tell us about that. I think kind of maybe allow us to be surprised by that when we see that image. Um, you also raise a really great photo or a great question here about conceptual skill, and you basically say that your experience with conceptual skill is that you found it pretty easy, and you comment that conceptual skill in the module, it talks about it perhaps being one of the most difficult skills to master. And I will say this, and I think you get it here, that conceptual skill is very much related to what makes you tick. What are the things that are important to you? And I can honestly tell you from doing this class for 20 some odd years that the majority of the students want to, at least at the beginning of the class, want to make images that they think other people will find interesting, or they think that other people look good. And what happens then, we see a lot of pictures of flowers or things that we sort of universally consider as being beautiful, where you make that next step to the next level of photographer is where you take things that are important to you, things that are passionate in your life, and you are able to then show those to people who might not necessarily see baseball as being a beautiful game. You can present these images, and people can walk away from them saying, okay, baseball is a beautiful game. Oh, there's interesting things in there. Oh, there's stuff there, that I wouldn't have seen in viewing the game from the stands. So for you, I guess it was easy, and that's okay. In fact, I'm glad you took this approach, and I'm glad you're working with stuff that you're passionate about and gets you excited. So good job with that. So what I really like here in looking at your images, that you're taking us into the dugout, into a place that the casual viewer is not going to see. So you see a lot of stuff that's going on, and I've certainly photographed enough baseball games to know that there's a lot of waiting around between innings, between pitches, between warm-ups, all that stuff. So sort of all of the different expressions you've got going on here to, the one guy who kind of seems like he's, just in his own world here, other person texting or doing whatever on the cell phone. This guy sort of looks like he's watching what's going on, and then this person, he's kind of giving you a gesture or whatever. So it represents sort of all the different things going on in the background behind the scenes, which I think certainly universally happens in baseball. I like this image from the fact that we've got some expression, we've got some emotion. The one thing that I would say about it is out of focus here. Your focus is actually on the screen behind this guy, and unfortunately I think what we want to be in focus is his face and his beard, and you can see when we zoom in on those, it's a little bit out of focus. Another behind the scenes shot that I like, the emotions, just sort of what's going on here. Again, we kind of look at the image, and it again seems a little bit soft to me. So your focus typically is, the focus area is in the middle of the frame unless you change it, and it looks to me like you focused in on, or the autofocus grabbed the fence rather than the players' faces, which is what we really want to be in focus, because that's kind of the interesting thing there. Again, same way. Great expressions, great gestures. I love the fact how this guy kind of seems to be the he's got the self-confident look and expression, and even his posture's straight up, and then you've got the guy behind him who's busting his chops, which it really counters the look, the expression, and all that on his face. So I think you really captured a neat moment in that image there. But again, you're out of focus here. This image, again, another one that's out of focus, but I can kind of live with it because I think what's interesting here is the background and sort of the synergy or the give and take between the players and the spectators in the background here. And in fact, this image seems a little bit more about the spectators than the players because they're kind of off to the side. So I can buy the focus on this one. That works pretty well for me. There, and notice this image. Notice how much sharper this shot is versus that shot. So you got your focus there. We talked about this shot a little bit in the last video, but again, I think it's a nice shot and good behind the scenes stuff. And then some action images, which I like the fact that that everyone's looking to the outfield. Looks like the ball's been hit out there, and sort of the emptiness of this, and having the trees and almost having the neighborhood in the background also says a little bit about the location, the place, what's going on here, and stuff like that. And then the last image, the home run image, the decisive moment, like that a lot. Again, we talked about this a bunch in the previous video, but I love, especially how you've positioned these almost absolutely perfect. You've got, this nice line, sort of psychological line bringing us in there. And the happiness of all the players on this bench is really contrasted by sort of the rigid stoicism on the body posture and even the facial expression of the ump. So I think it's a really good way to finish out your project. So that being said, I like, your conceptual skill here. I think is fantastic. Your biggest drawback though here really is the focus issue, and you've got those 3-4 images where they're not really tack sharp. And for our final portfolios, we really want to make sure that our images are technically correct, and focusing certainly would be part of those technical skills that we talk about. So keep an eye on that, and you want to make sure that your focus is always sharp, unless for some reason you're intentionally blurring something to emphasize motion or something like that. But I don't necessarily see that in those images that are out of focus. So great job on your conceptual skill. I think your creative skill here is also really good. So enjoyed looking at this and enjoyed seeing it from the behind the scenes perspective. So good luck with your baseball career. I don't know if you're playing this spring, but if you are, I'll get some shots of you and we'll have to compare. So enjoy the rest of your summer. Thanks. And next up, we have Leah's images. So, artist statement for your digestion here. I like the brevity of it. I think the images in many ways speak for themselves. What this really does is gives us the personal connection to these sneakers and why they're important to you and why you've chosen them for the subject matter of your project. So like this, and artist statements can be short, they can be long, it really all depends. And I think here I like the length of it because it really lets the images speak for themselves, but connects them to you personally in a way that maybe we wouldn't have necessarily known had we just been looking at the images. So then to the photograph. So what I always see with a project like this is the challenge is that we don't want to repeat images over and over again. So I think in the series of images, we really are looking to do as many different images as possible. So starting out here, love the close-up of the black and the white sneakers. I think that particularly resonates with me is the texture in the laces here. I think, when we think of sneakers, we don't necessarily always think about the laces, and especially the texture in those laces. We kind of just take that for granted. So I really like that about those images. And then the heel of the shoe, and I think what is particularly compelling here is how you're showing us the wear and tear of it, even so much so that the label and the logo are completely worn off of there. Love the fact that you're using very shallow depth of field. And, the danger with using a shallow depth of field is if you don't get the right spot in focus, then the image might not work. So had you focused kind of like on this area, I don't think the image would have worked. But you got the focus right on the money here in the Vans part, and so that works really well. And you've got the background pretty much completely out of focus. So we are just seeing the label and the wear and the tear in the sneaker. And then another view of the laces. And I love how you're also sort of down in a vantage point that is right on the ground. So it's from a place, or we're seeing it from a place that most of us are not used to seeing sneakers from. We're used to seeing sneakers from sort of eye level or higher up, looking down on them. So I'm glad that you got down low and looked at it. Another neat shot, especially using that shallow depth of field. And we've got the sneaker, which is in really sharp tack focus, juxtaposed against the water that sort of has this softness to it. And it looks like, you've caught it right at that decisive moment as the water kind of starts to splash away from the sneaker as you step in the puddle. Great shot, probably my favorite of the group so far. And then again, another really tight detail shot. I think what really makes this image resonate is that had you not included it with the rest of these images, the viewer probably would have had a tough time figuring out exactly what this was. But because it's part of a series here, we then understand that it is the bottom of the sneaker, and we kind of can place it in the context of the rest of the images. So I think, again, very successful, and that works for me. I love the little blade of grass that you've got on there too. And then a little bit different view of it. Again, really nice focus, really nice exposure. And again, you're kind of catching it in that decisive moment there. And you've got a great background here. You've got sort of a neutral background that allows us to really, focus all our visual attention on the sneaker itself. Another logo and label shot. I do like the fact that it's very different than that other label, and in some ways it seems like it's a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper, and so that speaks to the different levels of wear and tear that each one of these sneakers ends up getting. And we talked about this lace shot previously in the earlier video that we did, but again, great shot, and again, it allows us to focus in on the texture of the sneaker. And then I love this where we've got a little bit of dirt on the toe area of the sneaker, and probably a little bit more of a traditional view of the sneakers than we'd normally see. This is probably, us looking straight down on it, which is probably the way we see sneakers most of the time. But I like the arrangement too, where you have sort of the darkest sneaker framed within the middle of the other two. And then your last image, again, another little detail shot of the stitching. So, well done here. Enjoyed looking at these, and certainly I think you offer us a perspective on sneakers that, kind of the casual observer wouldn't notice. We start seeing the details, the stitching, the texture and the fabric, the laces, all of that stuff. So definitely a different approach to this, and certainly it echoes your connection to these sneakers that you outline in your artist statement. And And certainly all of these images too, if you look at them, the exposure is kind of the similar in the same. It's all done in overcast lighting. All of the images are kind of lit similarly. And so you look at this whole body of work, and it's clear that it was all done by the same photographer, um, using that same concept as a basis for the work. So great job with this. Really liked it. And good luck with the rest of your summer. And we'll see you down the road. And then we are going to wrap things up with Andia's final project. Let me center this out for everybody. And there is her artist statement. Really like your artist statement. I think you give us, again, an idea of what that connection is between the work and the things that you are passionate about in your life. So appreciate that for sure. One quick thing here, just make sure you proofread your stuff. This is kind of an easy mistake, spelling mistake that you made there, and we want to make sure for our final project everything is perfect. So proofread, and one of the things that I will always do is just have another family member or friend, or have my wife just read things over just to proof things. So certainly take that extra little step to make sure your things are perfect. So let's go into your images. So starting off, and by the way, I love the fact that you've titled your images too. This helps us out. So, this one's titled First Court You Played On. And I gotta be honest with you, normally I'm not super excited about seeing black and white and color images together in the same project. It kind of breaks up the cohesion of it, and it starts to make it look like the project is two separate projects. But what I like about this here is when we have black and white images, we tend to think about them as being part of the past. And this being the first court that you played on, it obviously is the past. So it really connects the viewer to your past, and it does so especially in a way that is through the aesthetic of the photograph, which it's a black and white aesthetic in here. So I like that a lot. It connotes or gives us a nod to the past, and so you've really used black and white photography very well in that image. And then some basketball shots. I love the decisive moment here where the ball is in the air. We've got a lot of different shapes and patterns in this image. What really works for me too, I think, is having all of this negative space there. It kind of makes us feel as though the gym is this sort of gigantic place, and you're just kind of part of this bigger picture going on in the gym. And then some practicing shots. I really love how you've chosen not to put the whole body in the photograph, and it's almost like the viewer is now you, and the hands are sort of an extension of the the viewer in this image. The one thing about this image, it's a little bit on the yellow side, which in Photoshop, let me go in here. I'm just going to pause you. So I just want to go into your images. I'm going to call this one up in Photoshop. And, in Camera Raw, we can select our white balance and change that. But if that doesn't work, we can just go under Image, Adjustments, and go into Color Balance here. And as you can see, our color balance, the way they're set up, is it's kind of got opposite colors here. So the image looks a little bit yellow to me, so we just add a little bit of blue. And we can do that in our shadows and our highlights and our midtones. And we can also see the images a little bit on the magenta side there. So we kind of play around with that a little bit. And we're getting a little bit closer that way. So that's one way we can do color balancing. Another way is we can go into our adjustment layers, and I probably did not show you guys this, so I'm not going to beat you over the head with this. But if we go into a curves adjustment and then select this white eyedropper there, so if you skim over these, it's going to set the white point in your image. So in this case, I'm just going to go in here and click on that, and that is going to clean that up a little bit so it doesn't seem too yellow. It's not horrible, and honestly, that gym is really tough to work with there and get your color balance correct, but just something to keep in mind in there. And then another interesting image that you've chosen to underexpose it, so it's a little bit on the dark side. But then what really works here, again, is coming back to the title, how you've titled it. And in having that title for this image, it makes a little bit more sense as to why it is dark. And love the vantage point here, and especially having the ball almost over the net as it looks like it's going to come through and do a swish. So great job on that. And then interesting, just a little shift to buying basketball equipment, basketball clothes and accessories, certainly speaking some more about the important things of your life. And I love how you've taken the sign and really using the patterns in the glass and isolated it within there, causing our eye to be drawn to the thing that breaks up the pattern in the photograph. And then the sneaker shot, which again, it's interesting here, we've got another pattern going on, and the thing that breaks up the pattern here, I think, is the price tag. So in seeing the price tag, then we begin to see how the cost of this equipment is certainly something that impacts you and your life. And then the food that you need to be conscious of as you are training to be an athlete. More shots in the gym, which I really like this shot. The only thing, I like the composition of the shot and all the gesturing going on. It does feel a little bit overexposed to me, though, a little bit on the too bright side. And a shot of sort of the empty gym, which again I like a lot here. And then another dark shot, which I think really works here because it talks about in the title, the end of the evening or the end of the practice. So it's almost like the lights being drawn down, and the end of the essay, photo essay that is, coming to a conclusion here. So I think again this works really well. I noticed in your artist statement, you mentioned a little bit about having your dogs in there. I didn't see any images of the dogs. I'm actually glad that you edited it out, because I think it really, as much as it's part of your life and the thing that you do to relax, I think it probably is different and separate than the basketball. So I think that was a good decision to leave that out. But you mentioned it in your artist statement, so it kind of leaves the viewer wondering, okay, where are these dog photos? What are they? So just again, proofreading and making sure that what's in your artist statement relates exactly to what's in your images. So good project. I like it, much like Alvin's images. I think you give us an insider's view of basketball, and I especially love those shots in the gym of the basketball and the hands taking the shot there. I think those are clearly images that are created by a person who's really heavily emotionally and psychologically invested in what they're doing and very passionate about it. So I think you present a side of the sport to us that is a little different. Just a couple corrections here. The exposure on the one image here, I think, could be a little bit better on that, a little bit overexposed. But other than that, I think really solid project, and just a little cleanups on your artist statement and exposure. And otherwise, you've got a really great final portfolio. So thank you, and good luck in the upcoming season. So for everybody here, just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work you did this semester. I know there's a lot to digest for 5 weeks in this class. So I do thank you for participating in the discussions and taking the time to dig deep and share with us all your passions in your photographic work. So great job, and I enjoyed looking at this, and I hope all of you get a chance now to relax and enjoy the last few weeks we have of summer before we get right back into things. So thanks, enjoy, and I'll see everybody down the road.